Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports World podcast where we are going to construct another daily fantasy lineup for Friday, June 3rd. But before we do that, I want to bring in Matt Dingler onto the show. So, Matt, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, ready to head into the long weekend, so it should be fun, I think. But what was not fun is we got within 4 points here. The line was at 146.90, we were at 142.60. So interesting night. A lot of our hitters hit home runs and went off, aside from a few guys, and then Eichhoff didn't do all that well. But that's what you kind of get from a guy that's $7,000. So all in all, not a bad night, but we did get close to cashing. So Matt, what are some lessons we can learn from our lineup? Our first one that stands out to me is not pick Carlin Starlin Castro because for a guy that has 1,000 career hits and in a game that the Yankees put up 5 runs and in a game that he batted second, he literally had like the least production that I could have imagined from him. So, way to disappoint Starlin. But what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
he didn't do a lot. It was such a good position for him to be in, though, that it seems like Steven's still a reasonable play. He just didn't do anything. The rest of the plays, Eichhoff actually was, I think, the second or third best pitcher on the slate, which is crazy, despite only putting up 26 points. I think Cody Anderson or Chase Anderson was better. Well, he was better.
He was better
Than him.
because he helped this guy win a seven
Yeah.
hundred and fifty dollars.
Oh yeah, I see him over there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone else was actually better though. It was
Uh-huh.
not a good day. We got our two solo homers from Gonzalez and Arenado. Gonzalez, just watching him, I don't. He hasn't. He doesn't. Watching him hit is interesting because he swings at a lot of bad pitches, and that's something I've been noticing for a while. But he also, when he connects, he seems to hit home runs. So it's. I guess he can be forgiven for that. Kim, as I was telling you earlier, was about 6 feet short of 2 home runs. He got caught just short of the wall twice during that game. Bogart had a really good game. Frustratingly, he hit about two-thirds up the wall with the bases loaded. So he would have had a grand slam if he hit it about 4 feet farther, and the Red Sox might have had a chance at winning, which would have been nice as well. But overall, we got a little bit of a part of that San Diego Seattle crazy game, so that was fun. But I think we did okay. We weren't too far.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty decent night. I mean, Arenado hit a home run, and then Gonzalez helped in as well. Like 4 points away from the cash line isn't bad. So I think we're on the up and up rather than a disastrous roster. One thing that I really want to point out is that Eugenio Suarez, despite the good night he had, he was pretty low owned, and this was a great pick of whoever had him. They probably ended up at the top of this list, and our roster, which didn't have him, but we had Arenado, who was much more expensive and produced half of what Suarez ended up doing. I mean, are these things very unpredictable, do you think? Like, how likely is it that we would have stumbled onto Suarez in our research?
Extremely unlikely. Other than the fact that he's playing in Coors, he had nothing going for him. I think he hit seventh. Maybe I don't know
Yeah,
what it says
sixth.
there. I can't see
Yeah, he
it.
hit sixth.
But so that's just not a great matchup spot. He wasn't facing. He's not good against righties. In fact, he's terrible against righties. He's
Yeah.
mashes lefties. If he was playing a lefty, you'd consider him, but he wasn't. And the reason he was even 6% owned is because he was playing in the Rocky Mountains, and the ball travels forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and basically, like one of the other things is Napoli did pretty well too. So another guy, if he's on the slate today, I think Cleveland is playing tonight. We should maybe look at him again against the Royals, depending on who the pitcher is. So let's move into tonight's slate, where I think we have like a 12 game slate tonight. I might be wrong in the counting, but just a guess. So in this in this slate, I think Syndergaard is the best pitcher on the docket today. Just the sheer amount of stats that Syndergaard has. I mean, the xFIP here, it's the second highest. I mean, I can sort it here so you guys can see, but his xFIP is far and beyond like what the next guy's is, and Yordano Ventura, who was on the mound yesterday for the Royals, his is actually the highest. So, in a season where I didn't think Syndergaard would have this type of a season, and he started the season with a ton of strikeouts. I mean, when you look at the xFIP and he's .05 away from Kershaw's amount, that is pretty impressive, I think. And not to mention that last game he got thrown out after like two and a third innings because he breezed the pitch past Chase Butley's behind. So I think this week he has no grudge against the Marlins. So I think Syndergaard is probably the best option on the docket today. Matt, do you agree? And should we just automatically roster him?
Absolutely, and yes.
Okay.
So basically, at this point, you're paying for a slightly worse, but not very much worse, Kershaw for the price of David Price or Johnny Cueto. And that's something you want to take advantage of, even in GPPs. He's safe. He's got high upside. I don't see any reason not to play him, especially with the value options we have at hitters.
Yeah.
If you do want to, though,
yeah,
there are a couple other ones. I was looking at Kenta Maeda against the Braves, but I wouldn't do that because the Braves are not a good hitting team. But he's actually been on a kind of a de facto pitch count. There's no stated pitch count, but he hasn't gone above 85 pitches in 4 games. So they're trying to limit his arm, and that limits his upside. So stay away there. 2 guys I like a lot. 3 guys I like a lot. Drew Pomeranz against the Rockies. A lot of runs have been put up in the Padres Stadium recently, but Pomeranz is a really good lefty. He's had a great year, and the Rockies can't hit lefty pitching outside of Coors. So that's a interesting matchup there for GPPs because of his high strikeout upside. Jimmy Nelson, decent pitcher, nobody great, facing an inconsistent Phillies team. And, again, can strike people out, but isn't someone that you would play in a cash game. These are all GPP plays. But he's been pretty consistent lately. He's put up decent amounts. He stayed on the mound. And against the Phillies, it should continue. And actually, is another option. The other pitcher in that game, Vince Velasquez, hasn't been great, but he has that K upside against a team that strikes out the most in the majors. And that's always something you want to work to get in your lineup in a GPP. You see the 57. He had an 87-point game earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And he's someone that, while is not consistent, if he is able to have a little bit better command, he can put up 10 strikeouts pretty easily. And he would be the third option in GPPs for me.
Yeah, I like Velasquez here as well, but it's just that Philly and Milwaukee series has been so weird because Philly's pitchers haven't really shown up at all. And I think the trend may continue, especially because Velasquez hasn't lasted beyond 5 innings in the last 3 starts. And against Milwaukee, I don't know if this is though they strike out a lot, and because Velasquez is a high strikeout guy, he may have an 87-point night tonight. Like, he may have a Scherzer, but the chances of that happening are pretty low, I think, because there's higher options on the mound as well today, and including the guy that we ended up rostering here. But one thing I wanted to say about Drew Pomeranz was he took on the Colorado Rockies earlier in the season. You can see the game chart here. On April 9th, he took on the Rockies at Coors. He lasted 5 innings, but that was still enough for 42 points. I think in San Diego, despite San Diego's Petco Park deciding to become the next Coors for momentarily, I think he will have another 40-point night and less of the 27 to 30 that he's been averaging for the last 3 outings. So definitely not a bad option if you are looking at 9,000 and below, basically. And as you said, Velasquez also fulfills that too. But
he's the riskiest, but
yeah, Velasquez is probably the riskiest, but the highest to go off as well and reach a really high ceiling. But let's lock in Thor and move on to catcher. At catcher, I'm beginning to kind of develop a theory here, which is we should really not spend all that highly on catchers because their offensive production historically, aside from a few notable names like Posey, Lucroy, and maybe Molina and Victor Martinez, mostly Martinez because he hits DH and doesn't actually have to catch. So he's more like he sits on the bench and then every third inning he goes up to hit. So that's much more manageable. So aside from Victor Martinez and maybe Posey and Lucroy and Gaddis, I don't think we should be targeting too many high-priced catchers because more than likely they'll put up 0. So why not have a guy at the bottom here put up a 0 and free up the room for elsewhere? So having said that, are you going to prove me wrong and suggest a top tier catcher now?
Well, there are a couple that I like, but essentially I have the exact same strategy. I never spend more than $3,000 on a catcher unless it's something essentially unavoidable, like Posey facing a lefty in Coors.
Yeah.
But there's exactly like you said, catchers are unpredictable. They're probably, along with shortstops, the worst hitting generally the worst hitting member of a roster other than a pitcher. And you want to find a guy on a platoon split who's better against lefties or better against righties, and then therefore is priced more cheaply, and you can take him in better hitting against one-handed, which is basically Derek Norris today.
Yeah.
Because he's priced for his total output, but he's facing a lefty, and he's so much better against lefties. It's ridiculous. He's like a career 280 hitter. He has a 360 WOBA forever, a 191 ISO against lefties, and those are numbers you want for 2,500. That's great. And we played him yesterday. I don't see any reason not to play him again today.
Yeah, I think his price jumped up a little bit, right? Because yesterday he was 2,300 yesterday, but against Rusin, it should be a decent matchup, I think. Again, as we said, the Padres have put up 16 runs 2 days ago and 13 runs yesterday, and somehow still lost that game yesterday. We should mention, completely collapsed in the seventh inning to the Mariners. But either way, we think Matt and I at least share the opinion that the Padres are going to continue their recent run of form, and they should be able to put up numbers. So we're going to lock in Derek Norris, but as we alluded to earlier, there are options here like Evan Gattis versus Jesse Hahn. It's a righty-righty matchup, but you never know. Gattis has home run potential as always, so definitely a good option. Lucroy I would stay away from because it's Velasquez and strikeouts and all that fun stuff. Buster Posey against St. Louis. He'll face Wainwright, so maybe this is a good option, but I would stay away from a top-tier catcher. The only other guy was Victor Martinez because he's a switch hitter, and he's going to go up against Carlos Rodon, who's had trouble keeping righties in the park, I think. So we are going to look at a first baseman for the Tigers eventually, like on the next stage, but if you are interested in a decent catcher that can hit for power as well, Victor Martinez should be a part of a Tigers lineup that should produce big. So having given those choices, we're going to move to first base, where my top guy on the slate is Miguel Cabrera against Carlos Rodon. I think Rodon has had a high WOBA against right-handed guys, so
350.
Right, yeah. So it's just a massive matchup advantage for Cabrera here. The last few games, Cabrera has hit for both power, 3 home runs in the last 10 games, but also contact too. So this is a good option for me. Is there any other that stands out to you?
Yeah, again, I think he's probably the best combination of value plus security plus upside you can have at first base. But if I was picking an overall top option, I think it's hard to ignore Ortiz.
Yeah.
Ortiz is facing one of the worst pitchers in the league, R.A. Dickey, who he's dominated for his career. He has a 420 WOBA against him in like 35 to 40 at-bats, which is when you actually start to consider batter versus pitcher, which I rarely do, and knuckleball. And Ortiz has shown that he can hit knuckleballs, which is pretty big. And he's on a hot streak. He's facing a righty. He's in a hitter's park. It's all lining up. I don't think we should pay for him in this. But if you are taking a lower pitcher, I don't think it's a bad idea at all to pick Ortiz.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at what he's done. It's hard to ignore that. And
yeah,
he's a better hitter than he seemingly has been in 5 years. So that's another top option. I like Chris Davis as well today, though.
Yeah, Chris Davis, again, still stranded at 10 home runs. So there's work to be done in Chris Davis. But if you want to take a risk, I mean, I personally don't want to roster him until he has a game again where he hits a home run. But it may be tonight, and he may have a 50-point night at any other point in the rest of the few weeks where he doesn't hit a home run. So Chris Davis, always a home run alert, so definitely go for him. The guy that I really wanted to set light on again was Napoli. Napoli against Volquez, it's a little bit of a... I think the matchup goes more towards Volquez right now because he's a good pitcher, but Napoli lights out similar stats. I mean, not similar, but like on par with Big Papi kind of stats. So at 3,400, he's $1,000 or $1,200 cheaper than Papi and may give you roughly the same production that Ortiz might, unless Ortiz has a really good night. So maybe look at Napoli as well. Matt, I know pre-podcast you were saying you were interested in Will Myers, so why is that?
Will Myers is significantly better against lefties. He's actually a really good hitter. I know that he's only 3,400, and he actually missed most of last year. but look at his overall stats for his career. It's not a long career, but he's a great hitter. He's underpriced now. He's got power, he's got speed, he's got consistency and contact. I really like him a lot, especially against a pretty average to below average pitcher in Rusin.
Yeah.
He's better against lefties. It's a good option. I think another guy that we should mention is Ryan Zimmerman. Zimmerman is silently one of the biggest lefty killers in the entire league. He's has a 420 WOBA against lefties for the last 2 years, which is unbelievable. Finnegan is not a good lefty, and he hits right in the heart of the order. I think he'll bat fifth, and he'll be driving in those runs that the other. I plan on having some Washington players in my cash lineup. So guys we'll get to later, Jason Worth, Michael Taylor. So those guys hit lefties really, really well. Nationals are the second team against lefty pitching this year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think he's a good option.
Yeah, so
But all that
unless...
said,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
like Cabrera.
Yeah, so unless there's any other bottom tier options, I think we should just stick with Cabrera because the matchup is handedly in his favor than it is in Rodon's favor. So moving to second base, do you want to, because we didn't target Zimmerman, do you want to target his teammate Daniel Murphy, or are there much better options tonight?
I'd say there's better options, especially because
Yeah.
of the lefty-lefty. And he's just so expensive.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of better options. I think Kinsler's an okay option against Rodon. Again, struggles with righties. That team's made to hit lefty pitching, despite having struggled against it for a lot of the year.
Yeah.
He's been pretty consistent, but I don't think we're going to have the money to spend on him. So I'll give a couple lower priced. One guy, Chase Utley, is a guy I like. He'll lead off against Tehran, who struggles to keep lefties in the park. 3,200 is nothing too expensive. He's been a little rough lately, but decent option. But the guy that I'll be putting in most of my lineups is Jurickson Profar. He will be leading off for one more day until Odor comes back for the Rangers. He has a relatively solid matchup. He's solid from the left side of the plate. He's only played in 6 games, hit a home run. I mean, look at those stats. He's got some speed. I don't see any reason not to play him today, basically, for his price. And
Yeah.
I have no other suggestions past those two.
Well, so the weird thing is I've been keeping up with the Rangers, so I didn't know that Mr. Odor was finally serving his suspension and there had to be a serviceable replacement for him. And Profar is a guy that I've heard of like last year and stuff, but these numbers are pretty sky high, and I definitely didn't know about the recent production he's had, so I don't mind spending $2,500 here to roster him. I think second base today, it's either very, very expensive and you get a safety net in Daniel Murphy or some other high-priced guy like Kinsler, or you go low and then get more money to spend at other positions. So I like Profar. Wasn't really on my roster, but there is a chance of rain. So what's the likelihood that the game is consistently delayed or even canceled?
From what I heard, the postpone looks unlikely.
Okay.
Delays are possible, but I don't worry too much about that. Especially that's nothing too bad.
Right.
The
Yeah.
ones that we actually need to worry about are Tampa Bay, Minnesota, and Oakland, Houston. I guess I didn't really know that one, but yeah,
Oakland,
Tampa Bay,
Houston.
Minnesota.
Yeah, Oakland, Houston is Minute Maid, so it's retractable.
There's one other one. Could you go up? I was looking at it earlier. It wasn't New York, Miami. That one will be fine.
Are you sure
I don't
it
know.
wasn't?
Maybe it's.
It wasn't San Francisco, St. Louis.
I'm not sure. That's possible, actually.
Okay, but yeah, really only the biggest threat is St. Louis and Texas, or not Texas, but basically St. Louis and Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't mind having Profar, especially because there won't be a rain delay. Hopefully he will lead off, as you said, so should be a good matchup. And it leaves us with $3,100 to spend. So at third base, I know Seager yesterday, both of us really didn't think he would have a great night, but he ended up being part of the platoon for the Mariners that put up 16 runs on their 7th inning kind of comeback. So Mr. Seager has had a pretty good last 4 games and pretty decent last 7 or 8 games. So on a good run of form here. Is this the time that we spend $3,900? He's a lefty going up against Darvish, who is coming back from the DL, and this is his second start. Is this the night that Darvish gets lit up, or is this another steady night and outing for Darvish?
See, I'm very torn here because I like it. He's also on an 85 pitch count limit,
Yeah.
but he's a great pitcher. He's not going to get lit up. But Texas's bullpen is one of the worst 3 bullpens, so they might get lit up. And I don't know. I'm very torn here. I probably would lean towards not playing him.
Do you know what Darvish's injury was? Was it arm related? Because if
Tommy
so,
John.
yeah, so he'll be on a pitch count. So just like
85 pitch count, yeah.
yeah, so I think if you're concerned about the bullpen and if it is really crappy, then we should go with Seager because uh, because Darvish is on a pitch count unless he has a great outing where in 80 pitches he pitches the whole game or something. Very unlikely. So the likely cause is probably going to be Seager going off as part of the Mariners lineup. So we can roster Seager, but are there better options on the slate?
A guy I actually really like is Pedro Alvarez. He's not going to be highly owned. Not many people actually really know him, but I watched the whole, unfortunately, pretty much every inning of the Red Sox series against the Orioles.
Yeah.
He's absolutely killing the ball. If you go to he's done very, very well, and he hits 6th, maybe 7th. He's much better lefty hitter. He's a better. I swear I thought he switch hit. He's much better against righties.
Mm-hmm.
Uvalde's given up a lot of contact.
Yeah.
Again, not somebody I'm going to go out of my way to target, but if you need a cheap one in a day where there's almost no cheap third baseman, that's a good option.
Do you want to just get Alvarez because there's other options up here at the top of the list that I liked?
Yes,
Prado being one of the contact ones, but yeah, like Longoria, rain delay, Valencia too high of a price. Jan Solarte, really not all that interested in him, but he does bat switch hitting, and against Rusin that might pay off. So do you want to look into Solarte, or is it too much of a wild card?
I just don't know enough about him to say yes or no. If you do, then that's cool. That'd be fine. But
I've seen a couple of his at bats, and though he has put up numbers, he seems a little bit too overeager at the plate. The same way like Gonzalez is, but when he does make contact, it's always strong contact. So he ends up getting hits and doubles and triples and even home runs. So he's a good option. He's kind of like Erickson Profar, but $1,000 more expensive. So I don't know if that's the best option here. What about
Travis Shaw is someone?
Yeah.
He's actually hit Dickey well for his career. He's the best Red Sox player against Dickey in a weirdly large sample size.
Yeah. But
So
Shaw's specialty though has been lefty though, right? He's a reverse split guy. So
not for his career.
not
This
for
season,
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
But not for his career. He's stronger against righties than he is lefty.
Okay. Yeah, so like the guy that really actually I wanted to suggest was Castellanos, who's a little bit cheaper than him against Rodon. I don't know the peripherals of Castellano. I don't have them
They're
pulled
good.
up. They're good? Okay. Because
Better
like,
against lefties. His BABIP's high, but again, it doesn't have to regress in one night. He's a good hitter. He's got power.
yeah,
I like-
and the last 6 have been a little bit concerning, but he has home run potential. He has power. 10 home runs already. 321 batting average. I think for 3,300 we might be kidding ourselves if we don't look at him and roster him. So if there's other suggestions, I'm open to it. But if not, we can move to shortstop.
Like it.
Okay. So shortstop, very interesting, I think, because I don't like any of the top options, but there are a few names that do stand out. Machado versus Eovaldi is always an option. Eovaldi versus any halfway decent hitter is always an option, I think. But especially Machado, who had a really good series against Boston, especially last night, where he hit a home run. So Machado's good, but a little bit pricey. So any other guy at the bottom here that kind of stands out to you?
I like Seager.
Okay.
Seager, Tehran, again, struggles with lefties. Seager's cheap. You're talking about that range when Seager finally gets down to that
Yeah.
35, 34 range. We might consider him. I think now's the
There
time
we
we
go.
start considering him.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like Seager in this plate option. He usually bats second right after Utley, so if Utley gets on base, there's RBI potential and run potential because Seager can either hit a home run, drive Utley in, collect a run, or Seager can get a run from Utley and then himself put up a run and then hit. So like every at bat, he's basically good for a average of 9 points if Utley's on base. So that might be a likely scenario because LA will stock lefties against Teheran tonight, so it should be a good option. Any other names you want to bring up as we move on to the outfield?
I really like Brad Miller a lot tonight.
You had him yesterday.
Unfortunately, yeah, I did, and he had a good game. Unfortunately, he is probably going to get postponed or rained out.
Yeah,
And unless something changes with the weather, I couldn't recommend him. But if the sun shines and the chance of rain goes away, then I like Brad Miller.
yeah, yeah. Really, no other names stand out to me, so we are gonna move to the outfield.
If Crawford plays, maybe, but
Yeah,
you
Brandon
never know
Crawford, but
anymore.
yeah, again, isn't Crawford in St. Louis against Wainwright, so that might be a good option. But
Yeah,
St. Louis is a tough park to go yard on. But if there's anybody that can do it, it's definitely Brandon Crawford against a righty that's struggling, which Wainwright definitely still is. So moving into the outfield, we have $3,000 remaining per player. I think just as an experiment, if we do Trout, who is the highest outfielder, that only leaves us with $2,100 players, so not a good choice. So maybe we should look more in the Springer 4,000 category than Trout category, which I'm okay with because I'm not really impressed by any of the top options on the slate. But as we get down to Springer and below, there is potential that's opening up for home runs. So do you share the same opinion? And if so, who are your 4,000 and below guys?
okay. I would say again, plug, uh, selfish plug for Mookie Betts. He's hitting Dickey well, and the only reason I keep bringing up who's hit Dickey well is because knuckleballs you can either hit them or you can't, and that's about the only time I look at batter versus pitcher. He's been great. I don't think I'll play him tonight. He's a little expensive, but
Yeah.
again, if you want one of the high options, he's good. But the guy I really like a little bit lower is Yoenis Cespedes. He is 3,600, which is crazy for the guy that has, I think, 15, maybe 16 home runs.
Yeah.
And he's in a pretty good matchup. He hits righty pitching better, and Kohler is no one to be afraid of. And if his park was better, I'd say auto play him.
Yeah.
But it's Marlins Park. It's nothing he can't do. I mean, we all know how strong
Yeah.
he is, but it just that little extra doubt creeps in. And I would say he's a good option. You see anyone else you see in this kind of mid range you like?
Yeah. So one thing that I want to point out about Cespedes is usually like I'm the one that points out how bad people have been in the seven past games or the last 10 games or whatever. But we should say that he faced pretty much three of the top
Yeah.
tier teams in terms of pitching. Like I don't know who exactly pitched from L.A. and Chicago and Washington.
Kershaw,
Kershaw
Urias, and no, yeah, Kershaw, Urias, and
uh, was Maeda there? Maeda was there because
yeah, Maya
Syndergaard.
was there.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Syndergaard and Maeda. So yeah, like again, a really tough pitching trio. I mean, Urias wasn't really much of an issue, but still, it was a tough outing overall. Chicago probably threw in Sale and Quintana and some other dude as well. So uh, really, just a tough past few opponents for him, which doesn't mean that he has become all of a sudden cold. It just could have been that he got overpowered because of an opponent. But the good thing is tonight he's going up as Cooler, whatever his name is, who's probably going to allow a lot of runs. So, and not a ton of strikeouts, which means that he's a contact guy. And if he's a contact guy, that means he has to be in the strike zone to like at least be relevant. So Cespedes usually hits pitches out of the strike zone. So I like this at 3,600. A guy that was on my mind was Mr. Trumbo against Uvalde, but yesterday was a night where Trumbo had two home runs. He's showcasing the power that he had with the Angels back in the day because I remember one of the seasons like Trumbo was one of the AL leaders in home runs for the Angels, and this year he's doing the same in Baltimore. So 17 home runs is definitely nothing to sneeze at. He's part of a Orioles team that is devastating opposing pitching right now. The Yankees have really struggled with their pitching department, especially in the starters. When you get to the bullpen, the Yankees do have a three-headed monster to throw out to people, but up until then, I think Trumbo will have a decent night. I'm not all too set on rostering him. I think there's better options. You mentioned Jason Worth as a possible candidate, so I actually like Worth in this instance a little bit more, especially because Cincinnati is a little bit better in terms of a hitter's park.
also, he's facing a lefty, and their bullpen is, as we know, the
Right.
worst.
Yeah, whereas Trumbo kind of becomes irrelevant if they go into the
Yeah,
bullpen pretty quickly. So
I like the Trumbo pick. Yeah, that was a good pick yesterday. Congrats on the head-to-head win
yeah,
for
40
Trumbo.
points.
It's painful watching him crank two out of the park,
Yeah.
but that's fine.
Yeah, see, I couldn't watch the game because the Orioles are blacked out, but you watched all three games of the series. And Trumbo was probably my choice to not hit a home run yesterday, but I was like, let's go with that initial assessment and just go with it. And he ended up
Sure.
doing well. But again, like I mentioned to you pre-podcast, I'm usually not part of guys that hit for 40 points. That usually never happens with me. It's more of a steady roster that gets me to the money line. So
Sure.
in order to round out this roster, we're gonna have to look at a $2,000 guy. Any name that immediately jumps off the page to you?
Well, again, it depends on the Nationals because last time the Nationals played a lefty, Chris Heisey led off,
Yeah,
and I know he only put up 3 points, but anyone leading off against Brandon Finnegan has a really good shot of continuing that, doing something good, and I would plug him a little bit. I don't know of anyone else, to be honest.
yeah. Any
Lefty,
other?
2000 is tough.
Yeah. Where's Mr. Heisey? Oh, here he is. Yeah. So Heisey is a righty against Finnegan. This wouldn't this be Heisey's third straight start? So he may not get it.
No, second straight.
Second straight. Oh, because March or May has 31 days.
They didn't play yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so perhaps he could do well. Does Heisey does have home run potential as well. He's going to be in Cincinnati, so this is a good time as any to have him there. Bryce Harper will probably miss another game too, I think. So tonight may be a good night to put Heisey in. Another hitter that stood out to me, not Cowgill. I'm just looking at his stats. Definitely not Cowgill.
I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, I don't either. But Alex Presley is has started a lot of games for the Brewers, and he isn't the best of hitters out there. I think there's better options, but a lefty righty matchup against Velasquez could be something that is beneficial for Presley. Basically, if we're paying $2,000, if there's anything more than 3 points out of that person, it's definitely a good pick. I think so. In the instance that Heisey starts out and he leads off, he's the best option at 2,000. If he doesn't start, I would not hesitate to put Presley in because it is a lefty righty matchup and he has played a collection of games for the Milwaukee Brewers. So, all in all, a good lineup today, I think. Matt, any other questions or feedback to on this roster at least?
No, I like this a lot actually. I think yeah, if Haji isn't leading off, then we can throw in Alex Presley because that's again a pretty good option
Yeah.
for 2000.
Okay. Is Godel from the Phillies? Just because I saw his name here, is he a decent option against Nelson? Although Nelson is somebody that you also want to have as a pitcher.
Mainly that's just based on how terrible the Phillies are. He's got power.
Yeah.
He seems like a reasonable option. I don't think I've watched him or I know very little about him. So unless I've researched him, I'd hate to say like yes, you should play him.
Yeah.
But again, based on the stats, what I've seen here, seems like a reasonable play as well. We could sub him in.
Okay. Yeah. So like we said, Heisey is our guy for now. But if he doesn't start today, we might go with Godel or we may go with Presley. So that's the 1, 2, 3 for you at $2,000. So Matt, I think this is a good lineup. I'm gonna save it here, and thank you all for listening and tuning in. And we won't do one of these in the weekend. Usually we like to take the weekend off. It is a bit of a grind, and I think it's good to have a few days off in daily fantasy and kind of approach the weekdays with a little bit more preparation and stuff. So Matt and I will not be around on Saturday, Sunday, but Monday we should be back to normal and put one of these videos out again. So thank you, and hopefully have a good rest of the daily fantasy night.